In general, TF2 is a game that allows for a multitude of different ways to customize your preferred gaming experience. Cosmetics allow your favorite class to basically look however you want, each class's vast array of weaponry lets you choose whatever playstyle you find most fun, and the countless other variants of both cosmetics and weapons can help add that extra layer of customization and individuality from player to player. Warpaints can help with this especially, since you can use your favorite weapons with a fresh coat of paint and show the whole server your custom choice of decorated weaponry. I'd say that Warpaints are my favorite form of customization in TF2, since they add that extra layer of flair on top of some of gaming's most iconic weapons of all time. So like, where did Warpaints go? Warpaints were first implemented in the game back in 2017 with the release of the Jungle Inferno update, with a mixture of original-made Warpaints and rehashes of pre-existing decorated skins in Warpaint form. Speaking of which, Warpaints would be synonymously used and put into the game instead of decorated weapons going forward. Warpaints can be used to create one of 44 different weapons with the same pattern as the one shown on the Warpaint itself. This can even help players get weapons they otherwise may not have had prior, since they don't go over pre-existing weapons in your backpack because they just create new ones. With an idea like this, it's no wonder that Warpaints seem like one of TF2's coolest and most unique additions. It's just a shame that when an update's being created, they're often treated like kryptonite when the update actually comes out.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, it's pretty much common knowledge at this point that the TF team doesn't seem too interested with Warpaints in general. Putting the quality of the Warpaints we've got aside, we've only ever received 10 Warpaint collections. Now, this may sound like a pretty reasonable number, but considering that Warpaints were first implemented nearly 7 years ago, with 3 of those 10 collections being added that same year, they really are seen few and far between nowadays. In fact, it's gotten to the point where at most, we can expect to receive 1 Warpaint case a year, if we're lucky. It's such a shame that people who really enjoy Warpaints, like myself, rarely ever see their favorite form of content being added into the game. But that is one issue with Warpaints. Not every player likes them as a concept, since unlike hats, which I can say that the whole player base most likely collectively enjoys or has no issue with, Warpaints are just not for everyone. In fact, I know many people who take a slight issue with Warpaints in general, and that's not really a bad thing. I mean, to each player their own, there's no harm in having an opinion. But I think there are a few reasons as to why not every player takes kindly to Warpaints. Firstly, the majority of Warpaint collections are holiday themed, heavily limiting the creativity and ability to fit in well with the loadout year round. Sure, Halloween and Smithmas themed Warpaints look good during Scream Fortress and Smithmas events, but during any other time of the year, using holiday themed Warpaints just isn't as desirable as more year-round neutral ones. And if you do like using holiday themed Warpaints year-round, more power to you. It's just that for many players, including myself, using a scattergun that looks like candy corn while playing in a map in the middle of a rainforest just seems kind of out of place. Of course, there are exceptions to this, where a handful of Warpaints and holiday-themed cases are generic enough theme-wise to work in any loadout any time of the year, but those just aren't seen very often anymore. The summer 2023 Warpaint case fixed this by adding Warpaints with no specific theme, so they look good during any season and with any loadout. But the problem with this collection is that it was the first generalized Warpaint case since the winter 2017 Warpaint case, which was at the time about 5.5 years prior. Whoops, took the TF team long enough to add another collection like that. Secondly, many popular and heavily desired Warpaints in general tend to be pretty expensive. Specifically regarding strange minimal wear and especially factory new Warpaints of pretty much any type from any collection, they run for a pretty penny. Strange factory new civilian grade Warpaints are pretty cheap to buy, and while they do look pretty basic, still have nice simple colors that mesh well with the overall look of TF2. But when you get to freelance Warpaints or Warpaints of higher qualities and more specialized designs, their prices start to skyrocket. I think the main reason for this is that higher grades of Warpaints of these qualities are obviously rarer and more desired, so players may try to do trade-ups to get Warpaints of a higher grade and therefore rarity. Commando, Assassin, or Elite grade Warpaints in particular are often sought after through trade-ups so that players can get strange factory new skins for a fraction of the price. The problem with that is that not only are you gambling to get the skin you want, assuming you don't use 10 of the strange factory new Warpaints like a madman, but you're also destroying the total number of these rarer skins in existence, further increasing their demand and therefore price. So if you find a war paint you like and want it to look like it was fresh off the presses from the Manco factory, and for it to come with a cool little kill counter, you're going to be dropping a hefty chunk of money on it. But if you want assassin and elite grade war paints like this, you're going to have to sell your whole backpack, give up this month's rent, and sacrifice the pinky on your left hand just to get the single war paint you really want, which is a shame since your favorite war paint may just so happen to have been selected as its case's elite grade selection. This was a huge problem with the war paint case last summer. Players realized, wow, these war paints look really nice year round and actually fit in quite well with the game's general design. And because of that, tons of players began seeking these war paints in Strange Factory New. That's why price-wise, we live in the worst timeline. Oh, Strange Factory New, secretly serviced my beloved, you'll be mine one day. Okay, so at this point I'm pretty much just yapping, so let me get back on track for this last portion. Something like hats and cosmetics are much cheaper to obtain and in general have been more iconic in the game's lifespan. Even strange cosmetics tend to be a bit cheaper, especially regarding strange cosmetics from cases with item grades. Because war paints are a more recent addition to the game by comparison, and have such few non-holiday variants, the few generalized war paints we come by today are going to be really expensive. It's not a huge issue when your favorite heavy hat is only a few dollars at most, but when your favorite war paint that you want to put on your favorite heavy weapon nears about $100 in value, that's when we have a problem. But looking from the perspective of the TF team, I think there's a pretty understandable reason as to why we don't see many war paints being added anymore. Content like cosmetics most likely have a pretty straightforward design and selection process, for the most part. As long as a cosmetic looks good overall and looks like it could suit the class's personality or base design, then I believe the TF team would most likely choose it to be put into the game. When it comes to war paints though, there are a few extra things to consider, mainly because instead of creating a mostly solid textured cosmetic, war paints require unique texturing, since a war paint is basically just flat textures placed over the base weapon models. In the most extreme cases with all class cosmetics, a workshopper has to ask themselves, will this cosmetic look good on all 9 classes? Whereas a war paint warrants the question, will this look good on 44 different weapons? Because there's so much more customizability regarding applicability for war paints compared to cosmetics, it can be hard for the TF team to choose war paint submissions, since now, a collection of 10 or more war paints has to be gathered, all of which have unique textures, some resemblance to the game's theme, assets, or pre-existing textures, and color design that would fit in the game well. Of course, there are exceptions to literally everything I've said so far, since many war paints have been added that break this thought process entirely. But it seems like recently the TF team has put in much more thought into which war paints are and aren't added. But that brings me to this point. From a developer standpoint, it's probably much easier to choose a selection of good-looking cosmetics on the workshop than it is to choose a good-looking collection of war paints. And if cosmetics of a particular set are all chosen together, then the process for choosing cosmetics becomes even easier than war paints. On the flip side, I think bad cosmetics are much more bearable compared to bad war paints, both the ones in-game and on the workshop. So if the TF team occasionally fumbles the bag and adds both bad cosmetics and bad war paints, the negative spotlight most likely falls on war paints even more. It's likely that because of all of this, it's probably just easier to omit a war paint case entirely from a seasonal update than it is to choose the prime cuts of community war paint submissions. So essentially, the future for war paints is unpredictable in TF2's current state. We may see them occasionally throughout upcoming updates through the years, or they may just be a scrapped idea altogether at this point. But I'm never gonna say never. The TF team has surprised us many times before. I mean, we got the blog post of a lifetime last year, along with the stellar war paint case that I just won't shut the hell up about that same update. So really, anything's possible when it comes to new war paints. I think the best course of action for us Warpaint fans is to go through the community workshop and vote yes on all of our favorite war paints. If they get enough attention, they could potentially rise to the top of workshop pages themed around specific updates, and may just give the TF team that extra bit of incentive to maybe try and slap together a new Warpaint case in the next upcoming update. I mean, at the time of me making this video, our Scream Fortress update this year is a month or so away, so maybe if we give Warpaints on the workshop enough attention, we might just see a new Warpaint case this year, hopefully with a really good selection of picks. But ultimately, I hope that what's happened to Warpaints in recent years turns for the better, and maybe, just maybe, we'll see some new Warpaints on the horizon. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Also, TF team, please add the ritzy war paint already. It looks so good.